When Ethan Crow walked into Ridgway's grocery store that night, no one noticed him. The automatic doors slid open with a quiet whoosh, and he blended right in with the handful of late-night shoppers. He didn't look suspicious. He wasn't acting erratically. He just looked like any other guy grabbing a few things after work. No one followed him as he made his way down the brightly lit aisles, and certainly no one felt afraid. Why would they? He was just another face in the crowd, pushing a cart, his expression completely neutral. But in the silent, unassuming corner of the store, a small black dome on the ceiling held a lens that was watching everything. A silent camera was already recording, capturing the mundane scene with cold, digital precision. It saw him pick up a carton of milk. It saw him linger in the frozen food section. And it saw the exact moment his ordinary face, the face you'd pass on the street without a second thought, began to shift. It was a subtle change, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, but the high-definition footage would later reveal it all. This footage, this simple, unremarkable recording from a grocery store security system, would become the key. It would be replayed countless times by investigators, news channels, and a public hungry for answers. They would zoom in, slow it down, and analyze every single frame. Because on that ordinary night, under the hum of fluorescent lights, that camera captured more than just a man buying groceries. It captured the exact moment an ordinary face began to hide a killer's truth, a chilling secret that was about to shatter the peace of this quiet town forever. Join us as we unravel the story of what the Ridgway camera saw. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating cases. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Tonight, we're journeying to the small town of Ridgway, a place so quiet you could hear a pin drop, or so they thought. Our story begins on a cold Friday night, in a town where shops close early and neighbors trust each other without a second thought. But this night was different. Inside the local grocery store, security cameras were humming, silently recording the aisles, unaware they were about to witness a crime that would shatter the town's peaceful facade. Just before closing, the lights flickered. A minor annoyance, nothing more, or was it? Outside, under a single buzzing streetlight, a dark figure moved swiftly, hugging the shadows. By morning, the familiar calm of Ridgway would be replaced by the cold, flashing blue and red of police lights, and a sea of unanswered questions. What happened in that grocery store, and who was the shadow in the night? Stick with us as we unravel the chilling case of the Ridgway grocery store murder. The next morning, the store manager arrived to an unnerving sight. The front door was unlocked. At first glance, everything inside seemed normal. The shelves were perfectly stocked, the registers were untouched, and the silence was absolute. But a chilling feeling lingered in the air. As he walked toward the back, near the storage room, the feeling intensified, and then he saw it. Hidden behind a stack of boxes, carefully concealed, was a body. The peace of Ridgway was officially over. News of the murder spread like wildfire, carried by a cold wind of fear. Suddenly, this town where everyone knew everyone became a town where everyone suspected everyone. Doors were locked, windows were double-checked, and friendly glances were replaced with wary stares. The police were stumped. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, not a single piece of physical evidence left behind. The crime scene was impossibly clean. It was as if a ghost had committed the murder. With no weapon and no witnesses, the investigation hinged on one single hope: the hours of silent footage captured by the store's security cameras. The truth was hiding somewhere in those digital files, and the race was on to find it. Investigators pored over the footage, their eyes straining as they watched hours of mundane activity. Empty aisles, a customer buying milk, the janitor sweeping the floors. It felt like a dead end, but then they spotted it. Just minutes before the mysterious power flicker, a figure entered the store. Dressed in dark clothing, with a hood pulled low and gloves covering their hands, the person moved with an eerie calmness. Their face was completely obscured. They walked directly toward the storage room, and just as they reached the door, the power cut out. The screen went black for a mere second. When the lights came back on, the figure was gone, vanished. No panic, no hurried exit. Just gone, the investigators were baffled. How could someone just disappear? They replayed the footage again and again, slowing it down frame by frame, and that's when they saw it. a tiny, almost imperceptible detail. As the hooded figure passed by a row of glass-doored freezers, their reflection was caught for a fraction of a second. The angle was poor, the image distorted, but it was enough. The reflection revealed part of a face, and on that face a distinct scar running just beside the eye. It was the breakthrough they desperately needed. The ghost suddenly had a feature. The search was no longer for a faceless killer, but for a person in Ridgeway with a very specific mark. The once sprawling town suddenly felt suffocatingly small. Who was this person? And how had they managed to pull off such a perfect crime? The investigation was about to get personal. With this new lead, the police began their search, discreetly at first. They reviewed drivers' license photos, old-school yearbooks, and local records, looking for anyone with a scar matching the one from the reflection. The town of Ridgeway, once a community of friends, now felt like a lineup of suspects. Every conversation, every glance was analyzed. The scar became an obsession for the investigators and a source of paranoia for the townspeople. Who had they been living next to all this time? Was it the quiet neighbor, the friendly mailman? The secret was hidden in plain sight. The pressure mounted. Weeks went by with no arrests. The town's fear curdled into frustration. The police decided to take a huge gamble. They released a sketch of the suspect, focusing on the distinct scar, to the local news. The image was plastered everywhere on TV, in the newspaper, on telephone poles. It was a risky move. It could either flush the killer out or drive them deeper into hiding. The town held its breath. The sketch was intentionally vague, except for that one defining feature. Now, it wasn't just the police who were looking. Every single resident of Ridgeway became a detective. The tip line lit up. People called in, pointing fingers at old rivals, estranged relatives, and quiet loners. Most leads went nowhere. But then a call came in from an elderly woman who lived on the outskirts of town. She was hesitant, her voice trembling. She said the scar looked familiar. It reminded her of a young man who used to do odd jobs for her years ago. A quiet, polite boy who had been in a bad accident as a teenager. He had moved away, she said, but she thought his family still lived in the area. She gave them a name. It was a long shot, a memory from years past, but it was the most concrete lead they had. The focus of the investigation shifted once more, zeroing in on a family that had been part of the Ridgeway community for generations. Armed with a name, the investigators dug into the family's history. They discovered the son, let's call him Alex, had indeed been in a car accident years ago, resulting in a facial injury. Records showed he had moved out of state for college and, as far as anyone knew, had never returned. But something didn't add up. His digital footprint was non-existent after he left. No social media, no credit card activity, nothing. It was like he had fallen off the face of the earth. The detectives decided to pay a visit to his parents. The family home was a quaint, well-kept house on a tree-lined street. The parents were respected members of the community, and they seemed cooperative, though visibly distressed. They insisted their son was living a successful life in another city and that they hadn't seen him in years. They seemed convincing. But one detective noticed something odd. On the mantelpiece, among the family photos, was a recent picture of a family gathering. In the background, partially obscured by a plant, was a young man with his back mostly to the camera. But when the detective looked closer, he could just make out the side of his face. And there it was, faint, but unmistakable. The scar, the parent's story began to crumble. The detectives knew Alex was not in another city. He was here, or at least he had been recently. They obtained a warrant to search the property. In the backyard, hidden beneath a workshop, they found a small, soundproofed basement room. And inside, they found Alex. He hadn't been living a successful life elsewhere. He had been hiding in his own childhood home for years, a ghost in his own life. Under questioning, the full, tragic story came out. Alex confessed to the murder. The victim was a former high school classmate who had been the driver in the car accident that gave him the scar. The accident had ruined Alex's life, not just physically but mentally. The driver had never faced any real consequences and went on to live a normal life, eventually working at the grocery store. Over the years, Alex's resentment festered into a burning obsession for revenge. He planned the murder meticulously, studying the store's layout and camera angles for months. He knew about the faulty wiring that caused the power to flicker. He used that brief moment of darkness to commit the crime and slip away unseen, returning to his hidden life in the basement. His parents, torn between love for their son and the horror of his actions, had helped him hide. They were his willing accomplices, creating the fiction of his life in another city. The perfect crime had been unraveled by a split-second reflection and a determined detective's eye for detail. The case was closed, but the town of Ridgway was forever changed. The trust that had once defined it was gone, replaced by the chilling knowledge that monsters can hide in the most familiar places. The unlocked door, the hidden body, and the secret in the basement became a dark legend, a reminder that even in the quietest of towns, silence can hide the most terrifying secrets. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Ridgway mystery. It's a powerful reminder of how one small detail can change everything. What did you think of the case? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy true crime stories that make you think, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more. We'll see you in the next investigation. In the quiet town of Ridgway, life was predictable, safe. People knew their neighbors, doors were left unlocked, and the biggest news was usually the high school football team's latest game. But all of that changed one rainy Tuesday evening. A beloved local shopkeeper was found murdered in his store, and a single piece of evidence was left behind, a grainy security camera image of a figure in a hooded jacket with a distinct scar visible on their hand. The town, desperate for answers and a return to normalcy, immediately seized on this detail. Suspicion quickly fell on a former employee, a young man who'd been fired a few months prior and coincidentally had a similar scar. It seemed too perfect, too easy. The town breathed a collective sigh of relief. The monster had a face, a name. Media vans rolled into Ridgway, their satellite dishes pointed at the sky, ready to broadcast the story of a small town's nightmare and its swift resolution. Fear began to curdle into a strange sort of communal satisfaction. The case, everyone believed, was solved. But for the lead detective, something just didn't add up. It felt too neat. He pulled up the suspect's file and cross-referenced the timeline. The ex-employee, the one everyone was so sure was guilty, had an airtight alibi. He was 100 miles away, with receipts and witnesses to prove it. The timeline was completely wrong. The relief that had washed over Ridgway was premature. The killer was still out there, hiding in plain sight. The police had to go back to square one. They returned to the dark, quiet evidence room, the hum of the servers the only sound. They replayed the security footage, frame by painstaking frame. They watched the hooded figure enter, the flash of the scar, the hurried exit. They watched it again and again. Their eyes were bleary, their hope dwindling. They were looking for something they had missed, a ghost in the machine. And then one of the younger officers pointed at the screen. Wait a second. Rewind that. It was almost nothing. A faint, distorted image in a puddle of rainwater on the asphalt outside the shop. Another camera angle, one they had initially dismissed as useless because it faced away from the store's entrance, had captured a fleeting reflection. In that shimmering puddle, for just a fraction of a second, the back of a delivery truck was visible. And in that reflection, part of a license plate could be deciphered. It was a long shot, a blurry series of numbers and letters mirrored in dirty water, but it was their only shot. Running the partial plate through the system was tedious. It brought back hundreds of possible matches. They cross-referenced every single one against local delivery companies, businesses, and private owners. Hours turned into days. The list slowly shrank. Finally, they got a hit. The truck belonged to a local catering company. And the driver assigned to that truck on the night of the murder was a name that made the detectives pause. It was someone they all knew, someone trusted, someone who would never, ever be questioned. The killer wasn't an outsider, a drifter passing through. The killer wasn't the disgruntled ex-employee the town had vilified. The killer was one of them. Someone who smiled at them in the grocery store, someone who volunteered at the town fair, someone who blended in so perfectly they were practically invisible. The chilling realization settled in. The real danger wasn't the monster you imagined, but the neighbor you never suspected. The final, damning piece of the puzzle came from a source no one had even thought to check. A traffic camera, mounted on a pole 2 streets away from the crime scene, had been silently recording. Its purpose was to monitor traffic flow, not solve murders. But its unblinking eye had captured the delivery truck pulling over just minutes after the murder. The footage was clear. The driver stepped out, thinking they were hidden in the shadows of a quiet side street. They pulled off their gloves and pushed back the hood of their jacket. And there it was. The scar on the hand illuminated for a moment under a streetlight. It was unmistakable. But it was the face that caused a wave of shock to ripple through the police department. It was one of Ridgway's most respected residents. A volunteer firefighter, a youth sports coach, someone known for their kindness, their willingness to help anyone. This was the same person who had stood at the town vigil, comforting grieving neighbors, their arm around the shoulders of the victim's own family. When the arrest was made, there was no high-speed chase, no dramatic standoff. Officers approached the person's home on a quiet suburban street. They knocked on the door. When it opened, there was no denial, no fight. Just a quiet acceptance. A bone-chilling silence fell over the neighborhood as the familiar figure was led away in handcuffs. Disbelief was etched on every face. The person who brought them casseroles, who coached their kids, was a cold-blooded killer. The cameras had seen it all. The grainy store footage, the reflection in the puddle, the traffic cam 2 streets away. Each one held a piece of the truth, patiently waiting for someone to put them together. The town of Ridgway would never feel the same again. The sense of security was shattered, replaced by a lingering unease. People started locking their doors. They looked at their neighbors a little differently. They learned a hard lesson. That evil doesn't always come with a menacing scowl or a threatening posture. Sometimes it smiles and waves. Sometimes it's the person you'd least expect walking past you every single day. And sometimes, when human eyes fail and judgment is clouded, the camera is the only witness brave enough and patient enough to never look away. In the end, the killer, whose name was Ethan Crow, wasn't exposed by a guilty confession or a witness stepping forward in a moment of courage. He wasn't caught because of a panicked mistake. He was caught by a network of silent digital eyes that never blink. Long after the crime was committed and the trust of an entire town was broken, the footage remained, a permanent record waiting to reveal what everyone had missed. In Ridgway, justice didn't arrive with a bang. It arrived quietly, one frame at a time, proving that no matter how carefully a killer tries to hide in the light, the truth always finds a way to be seen. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime investigations.